Hartford. We are a group whose goal and vision is to help the Hartford get to the future faster. We do that through two mechanisms. One is corporate venture capital, and the other is an incubator. They work together, but they operate somewhat distinctly. And I just want to note that for the bulk of this conversation, I'm going to be talking mostly about the incubator side.
Yes, Corina.
Okay. I'm Corina Kuiper from Philips. Philips is organized in three sectors, so we are in the healthcare, in the lighting and the consumer lifestyle. We have several instruments on corporate venturing, so we really see it as a set of instruments. We have 3 incubators in our corporate technology environment who really are nurturing the more breakaway type of venturing, but we do also new business development venturing in our sectors. As well, also we work with venture capital and take stakes in companies. So we use, based on the different types of innovation, we use different instruments. We don't have a corporate fund by ourselves.
Good deal. So these are 2 examples of 2 leading-edge incubators, clearly different businesses, different approaches towards things, but there are a lot of similarities. Would you each give me a sense, Corina, would you give me a sense of the vision that you have, the sort of overall goal and definition of winning for your incubator?
I think if we really can go into new spaces, really get growth, which is not trying to get just market share, but really entering or being able to create new categories, not only going into markets where Philips is not in, but which already existing. That is for me not new business development. The definition we use for new business development is that you really create a new category where you really have to have change for behavior for a customer, so really an outside-in perspective. So,
implicit in that is something that it has to be a growth area, something that's going to contribute significantly.
So it's not, it's a kind of blue oceans where you really can say we have created new categories, because that is really additional growth.
Right, but you know, part of the thing is any growth is measured in comparison to how big the company is. Now, Philips is a very large company. What's the annual revenue currently?
It's around 25 million euro then.
Okay.
But yeah, one of the things is growth. It's one of our main topics.
But a couple million euros isn't going to grab anyone's attention. You're looking for potential growth much larger than that.
Yeah, in the end game, yes. Of course, but every adult has to be a baby first.
No argument. We'll come back to the baby phase in a moment. But I just wanted to say, well, you know, what is it you're looking for in the long run? Similarly, Jacqueline, can you describe the vision and goals for the incubator?
So again, it's really about helping the Hartford get to the future faster, and it is not explicitly about growth. So there can be growth that comes from that, but when we talk about our scope for the incubator, we talk about opportunities that are 2 years or more out and or off core. And when we start them, we don't necessarily know where that opportunity is going to lead and what the ultimate size of it is. And if we were trying to filter things at the beginning, then we might kill things because they seem small and they might be big. Also, by talking about things in that perspective, we end up looking at a range of different opportunities. In the beginning, we talked about it as expansionary versus breakthrough opportunities, with sustaining things being left to the businesses to do. And the idea was we would be 60% in the expansionary and 40% in breakthrough. I would say that we're a little more on the expansionary at the moment, but it's very, very difficult to define and kind of do a bright line between what's expansionary and what is breakthrough.
What's your definition of those two, just so that I'm clear, since they overlap?
So as I said, it's actually quite difficult to come up with what that line is, and so we're evolving it. And so if I was to describe it in the past, expansionary would be something that is more adjacent to the current businesses and supporting the current businesses, whereas breakthrough would be something that would be quite different, but serving our customers or going beyond our core. I'm currently working on some portfolio management guidelines for the innovation group, and you know, lots of different consulting firms have very nice ways of thinking about these different types of innovations. But we haven't found one that fits us, and so I'm working on one for us that's the definition that's going to be better than expansionary and breakthrough. But it includes a range of things that can give an indication of how what we're trying to do. And so there's opportunities that might be more disruptive and breakthrough. There's things that might create optionality. There's opportunities where we can see something that's coming and we know we're going to have to do it, but the lead times are long and it's going to be really hard and the businesses are going to have a really difficult time getting there, in part because of how long the lead times are. And then there's things that we call kickstarts, which I never in the beginning when I started this would have thought we would do, but now I see the value because if most of our portfolio is on things that are going to take 2 years to gestate, having a kickstart where we do something that the company knows it needs to be done, but we can do within just a few months and get the company going on something, that creates some really good near-term opportunities and ROI that helps to bridge that long-term gap. So
it also provides some credibility inside the organization and mitigates those organizational antibodies.
Well, I want to go on the definition. I think my colleague will tomorrow will give a presentation. We have tried to develop a kind of what we called innovation 4x4, where we have a kind of definition now. What is new business development? What is more product development? And we have chosen for a very much outside-in approach because often companies are saying, yes,
what does outside-in mean?
From a customer perspective. So we are not looking at, is this new to Philips? Because we are, for example, entering the espresso machines. But if you ask a person, do you know what an espresso machine is? They can tell you anything about what they like or dislike because this is something what is known. So what we have used to differentiate, are we going to manage this as new business development or as more product development is, if you look at what you are proposing, does you need change in the behavior of the customer or somebody who is in between the customer and you? And therefore, do you need new capabilities? Do you need business modeling?
New business
so that
model,
is really what we use. And then based upon how disruptive it is, we use what the right incubation or what is the right innovation type. So we really have chosen for an outside-in approach for that.
Well, you just said something interesting, and it goes back to you choose the model, the approach based on the type of innovation. It's not as though even it's an incubator. It sounds like it's a uniform thing. It's not. It's where you select the right approach. In other words, how you innovate has to fit what you're trying to accomplish. Fair?
Yeah, so we really look at that. So because I think what's changed with open innovation, it can be new for your company, but it's already existing and the data are there. There are not a lot of partnering, other ways you can find for it. And in the past, with more closed innovation, it was like we need to do everything by ourselves.
Without a doubt.
So therefore, we really we have made that.
Well, I think this idea of open innovation, thank you, Hank Chesbrough, for giving us that nice terminology, the idea of closed being the old internally oriented and open, I think has great validity. I mean, it's very clear that there are about 1 billion IQ points outside of your company that you could access if you wanted to do innovation. But, you know, partnering with those folks is not always so easy. It's an integral part. Jacqueline, what's been the experience in trying to partner effectively? Has it been a smooth, sunny trip, or has it had some hills and bumps in the road?
It's been a lovely road trip.
Oh, okay. Well, Kuiper.
No, it's quite challenging. And so for us, that's one of the things that affects our cadence perhaps the most. So the Hartford is very used to partnerships with intermediaries. We have agents and we have brokers. We're not so used to partnering with third parties in order to serve our customers' needs. And so that becomes quite challenging because we have ways of viewing things that are proprietary, ways of viewing our intellectual property, and who owns the customer. And
what do you mean, who owns the customer?
So whose customer relationship is it? Okay. What happens if something ends?
What if it goes wrong?
Right.
Well, okay.
And so all of that ends up happening through the contracting process and sort of the negotiation process around partnering, and it becomes can become very challenging because each of these types of partnerships are somewhat different from each other, and they're all completely new to the Hartford, completely new. We're actually preparing something that is kind of similar to a developer program or a partner program. So now not only do we need to be developing working with a single partner in order to do this, we actually have to come up with a way of developing something that is going to be amenable to a range of people in advance. And so these are very new things for the Hartford, very new muscles for our legal folks. And
it drives the legal folks crazy.
Definitely affects our cadence. So partnering is new, but the great thing is that the company is game.
But I would go so far as to say that for an incubator, partnering has to be a core competency.
I think you have to, but also here what we have learned, partnering is too broad. You need a kind of granularity of innovation, but also a granularity in partnering. When you are more in the new business, so where you really is something, you create a new category for, which is nothing existing, it's a kind of co-creation. So also what you need totally different capabilities of managing the partnership relations. We have also a history with Philips where we have a lot of strategic alliances. One of the famous is more the Senseo. But there you have a big A company working with another big A company who knows the market, the information is available. And what we have seen by having the incubation, that we have now created completely different capabilities of how to set up a partnership. It's really staged, where you say, we agree to a certain point, we are friends. And it could be that you then at a certain moment starting to go, your partner becomes your competitor, or your competitor becomes your partner. You can't predict. So therefore the relationship, the type of companies you work with can be small startups or others. So you get a completely different way of partnering on business development.
And there's different types of partnerships. Yes. I mean, what Apple has with the SDKs is a very clear kind of value contribution by these folks. They have to fit into these rules. It's not quite your traditional sort of take or pay, but it's not a strategic relationship either. They're not sharing intellectual property. Like, that's a separate kind of relationship. That was maybe involved more in the actual development of the iPod or iTunes. I use that because it's a common example that's public. But you mentioned something very important, Jacqueline, which is the cadence part. Let's come back to that. I posited that cadence is one of the ways you can tell whether things are working properly. If it's going slowly, things aren't going as well as they should, and something partners or process or people would need to be fixed. But rapid, high rates of learning, prototyping, and exploration are positive signs. Do you agree with that? Let me go to Jacqueline first and then come back to you.
Absolutely. So a goal is for us to be fast, right? Get to the future faster.
Do you measure it?
We don't, but I think we might going forward.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to know whether it was
probably going to start doing it internally, and then we'll talk about it as a metric.
That means you don't want to get stuck being held to something right away.
Not yet, when there's many things that are outside of my control and my team's control. So cadence, we try to be fast, and there are many cases where we are much faster than the businesses themselves could be, although we may not be faster than the market. And we try to be very fast, but then there's other times when something like the legal aspect could make things go much longer than we would like. I would say, in general, we're faster than the rest of the company. We're slower than people on the team would like. We'd like to get that faster. What we find is that with every project that we do, and we're a much younger group than at Philips, with every project that we do, we're creating a new execution pathway. And once we've worked with a particular part of the company to execute, the next time we come back, we're faster. They're up the learning curve, they get it. And so that is very helpful. And so I think over time, we're just going to get faster and faster as we know how to do things. But there's still things that are going to be new and are going to be speed bumps. But I do think we're faster than the rest of the company for the most part. But some things, if we weren't the ones doing it, regardless of how fast or slow it's taking, it would not get done.
Important point. Karina, you were going to say
I would say yes and no, because acceleration or measuring acceleration can be quite dangerous. Because big companies, when you tell to them, accelerate, it's one direction, it's just going forward. And with venturing, what we mean with acceleration is learn faster, make the loop very
That's what I was referring about,
small
prototyping.
lobs. But that is not the understanding of a big company. So what we have seen is that they create these business plans and then say, okay, and they start launch for selling things instead of pilot to learn. So yes, in one way, rapid prototyping, do kind of very quick loops. That's what we really try to bring as a competence from the incubation. But trying to say acceleration within a big company as a measurement, really you can be right and dead right very quickly. And you can't force a customer to change behavior. No. So yes, you can speed up your internal processes, but if you don't find a good way to educate and get building the ecosystem, then sometimes it's really about timing and not only about speed. Okay.
So I would agree, and so for us, when I talk about what we would measure, it really is, it's the learning loop. Right. How fast did that loop take us? It's not necessarily the elapsed time, because there's too much uncertainty in the process. It's about how quick can we get on the learning loops?
Well, think about Dyson. It took 5,721 attempts to get it right, and part of that may have been design, but the truth is that it was the high rate of learning. Had he gone, I would suggest, half that speed, it never would have happened because it would have killed the whole thing. No one would have funded it that long. Even he might have backed up.
It's depending also on the cycle in the market.
Oh, absolutely.
If you, for example, in healthcare whatsoever, you have to go to certain budget cycles, certain things, so it's also depending on the type of industry,
right.
How quick you can do it.
Right, but the point is that it's not the traditional business unit cadence, and it's a lot more exploration and learning oriented. But I want to get to something which I think is important, and I'm interested in your perspectives, which is it seems to me that incubation and corporate venture capital are sisters or related activities, or at least they're certainly compatible, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Do you agree, or do you see them as disparate standalone items?
Absolutely both. We have also in the past, we had more experience with external venturing. We have had a fund in the past, the famous 2000 year. We really restarted the whole process in 2006, especially on incubation. But what we are now really working on is trying to get also more external venturing. We have making the decision not try to create a fund by ourselves. We don't have this kind of capability, so we work close with the experts, which are the venture capitalists. So
but the point is that there's some compatibility.
You need it, because if you have only incubation, you have nothing what keeps you honest. And one of the venture capitalists, they have a tremendous deal flow, and a lot of our work is pattern recognition. And that's how you can help and coach stuff. So if you are not having a very good mirror or window to the market of seeing what really is happening out there, you will make the wrong decisions in your incubation process.
Right.
If you do only external venturing, at a certain moment you want to have that is a landing spot in your company. So if you don't have capabilities of doing that transfer, then you can have bright acquisitions of companies, but they will be kissed by death by the mother at the moment of acquisition, and you don't have it. So for me, if you really want to be successful, you need to have both. And I even would like to add partnering. So you need to have internal venturing, external venturing, and partnering. That are for me the three. I called it
open innovation, but those are the three legs of that stool.
For me, the three, you need to have, if you miss one, you really will have problems in being successful in your corporate venture.
I did get a vision all of a sudden, though, of going to the corporate venture capital arm and saying, we need you for pattern recognition. I think that might cause them to at least pause for longer. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that I'm not sure they ever considered themselves in that business. But no, it's a very valid point. Jacqueline?
Well, absolutely, because White Stag has both pieces, not just under the same organization, but we're also in the same physical space, and they are very symbiotic. So as Kuiper described, there's the element of the venture group is able to bring an external viewpoint to the incubation team and make sure that they're staying fresh and seeing things, and the pattern recognition is absolutely important. We had an investment thesis that we did on the VC side for the future of the car that also is very relevant to our activities on the incubator side, and I don't know that we anticipated that. As Rob has said, much of this is emergent. The other part that is nice about having the two together is how it goes the other way. So for our corporate venture capital group, when we do a strategic alliance, either along with our investments or separate from that, when it comes time to look for how we derive value from that alliance, if there is work going on in the incubator that is related to that company, it's very, very easy to get something going and to get involved in pilots and et cetera. If the incubator does not have something going on, then you're back to having to find opportunities within the business unit. But for the parts that are in the incubator, it's much, much easier because we're part of the same group.
Great. I mentioned metrics before, and it's an area that some do, and some do a lot of, and some do a little of, some don't do any yet. Jacqueline, you said you all are just sort of toying with working on the first set of metrics that you'd use. Clearly there's some unofficial metrics. I mean, faster is better than slower, some things like that, but you don't have a formal measurement system in place.
We do not at this point. The great thing though is that when we created White Stag, I was able to get senior leadership approval for the idea that the metrics for us are going to be very different from the metrics that you use for the core business. And when you're looking at a gestation period that's 2 years or more out, you're going to have 2 years here where it's going to be really difficult to figure out how are you doing? So we set up some ideas about what the metrics would be, inputs, throughputs, and outputs, recognizing that the output part would take a while to hit.
It's a lagging indicator.
It's a lagging indicator. We have some ways of looking at the inputs and the throughputs, and certainly when we take something to market in a pilot or a market test or a launch, those are viewed very positively, even though we try not to be too obsessed on that as a metric. So we know that that's where we're going to be doing metrics as well as portfolio management. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm at the point of figuring out what is our portfolio, what are our portfolio targets going to be, and I'll be working on that with members of our executive committee. And part of that is around innovation themes or platforms, and part of that is also around those types of innovation that I mentioned, like kickstarts, breakthrough, optionality. And I think part of the performance metrics will be how are we doing in terms of meeting those portfolio targets for how much activity we want to have in each space.
Karina, where metrics sit in your organization?
You have two types of metrics. There's the metrics on, I would say, more innovation. It's like the spread, the portfolio. Are we spending balance compared to new business breakaway versus more established business, keeping the current company also cash positive? And you have the metrics on venture level. And what we see there, and therefore it's also very dependent on the stage. It makes totally no sense.
Stage of maturity of
the
development.
Maturity of it, because if you're a very early venture, net present value, you can joke yourself completely. It doesn't make any sense at all. So what we do is, to the very early type of ventures, we very much manage them on cash out. Because what we have learned in the past, there's a tendency in big companies to start very quickly to measure sales. And what you get with the early ones, when they enter from baby to teenager stage, they overestimate always their sales. So, and then probably cost control is often quite good. So we really measure them very much on cost, on very tangible deliverables, like you prove that you can really go to a customer and that you have a rollout in a whole chain of hotels instead of just having one hotel. So very much more, very staged. And also with very, not only financial, but also real proof points that you get some traction, that you have built the ecosystem, that you have certain customers or partners behind you.
You know, that leads to an interesting point, which is you were just talking about things that demonstrate commercial success, or they're precursors of success. They show viability. So this leads us to this very troublesome thing that I mentioned. I just had a slide on it. I just mentioned it in passing, but I know from discussions with you and with work with a whole bunch of incubators that this issue of making the transition to a full-fledged commercial operation, or at least transferring whatever this business is to some business unit that will be responsible for then scaling. This transition is inherently difficult. And rather than talk about it in vague terms or in generalities, can each of you give, without giving any particularly important or sensitive information away, a story about where that has or hasn't worked well?
I can give one, which a very lively one. We have made a lamp which will live in colors. I know perhaps some of you know it. It's an LED lamp which really comes with a very interactive remote control. You can change exactly the color of what you would like to have. And
so you can dial in the quality. You can dial
exactly. It's a kind of round shape, and it's a very innovative product. But if you look at the original idea, it was the start of scene setting. In lighting, we see a tremendous paradigm shift from the lamp to much more LED. Right. But that's not just the change of the lamp itself, it's you go into software, which becomes crucial.
So it's a different business model,
It's a completely different business model.
These things last 15 years or something. So you don't buy a bulb, you're buying an environment, so to speak.
That was the first one to set in a more scene setting at home. And that's where before we started even with all the incubation programs. And what you saw is that they had a really good business plan. And the idea was, if you go to market, you should create a market because it's brand new. People don't know how to set this scene because they didn't have this type of lighting solutions at all. But then you saw that the corporate environment very quickly said, let's use the synergies of our company. That's the kind of habit they want to help these babies to become. Wish? Yeah, it's a kind of a kiss to death, certain things.
You hug them, they hug them so tight that they can't breathe.
Yes, they can't breathe anymore. So what they were forced to go into the normal stores where you buy lamps. Now there you can't give any education to a person of what you can do. So people are there packing the product and say, okay, nice, but how do I get the right scene setting? Yeah. And in the store, we also had a kind of disco, so that it's almost self-explaining that you can have different type of colors. So you unpack it, and you couldn't find this disco effect, so people brought it back, and we had to design it in. But the thing with this whole stuff is that...
I take it this is not a success story.
No, yeah. But in the end, we could have had more. So this was for our learning story. We have done at a certain moment really more things. But there we really skipped this pilot to learn. Afterwards, if you look back, it's better to put this in design stores where a person helps you with the lighting design, say, I have a new concept. And we use this often internally to say, okay, you have created a new product, but you didn't grasp to create a new category.
That's right.
And that is where, so the main message is, where we see where it is very dangerous, what we call the teenager stage, is that you have to have a protected environment where you test it in the market. It's not like a home placement study or so. It's really out there. You have all the elements of the venture, but you really have to test it. So it's real life commercial sales. It's real life, but it's not a commercial release.
It's not full scale.
Exactly, and where you test it, see the reaction, educate the market, see what they really like. And that's where we work now a lot and have given.
And also see that the alternate business model, that is not selling on a shelf in the traditional standard way,
plan B or plan C.
Because you always find out that it's not quite right the first time.
Absolutely.
And there isn't a successful venture around that hasn't learned that their business plan, their business model wasn't right the first time out.
Always in
so it's the same thing in incubator.
Yeah, and that's where you can correct it, because what the thing is, if what has happened with this lamp, you are out there and it's changing perceptions when you go big. That's what I was with this acceleration. It was like, let's go for it. This is so innovative product. We don't wait for it. Let's conquer the world. And then you go flat. Yeah. So you don't have the whole opportunity. So for me, that pilot to learn, that go full-fledged to the market, but in a controlled environment. Okay. And it's very important.
That's a good story. Jacqueline.
So when we created White Stag, we built an architecture, or we built sort of the structure of the house, and there's aspects of it that we just put in place right then, and aspects of it that we knew we would figure out kind of when we got there in an emergent way, very similar to how our opportunities emerged through our process. At that time, we thought, well, we knew that this transition point was going to be a really big deal, and all the research is that groups like ours kick things out too soon. And yeah, because it's an operational slog, and so you want to get it out, and the businesses are feeling antsy like they really want to own it, but at the end of the day, it's probably peanuts and it's going to break once they get it, so you've got to be very careful about how
it's that they break it, isn't it?
I don't know, because we haven't gotten there yet.
All right.
But we thought that there was going to be this bright line moment in time when it was going to be transitioned. And so as we've been approaching those sorts of time frames, we've started thinking about, well, what does that look like? And so we thought, okay, we want to make sure that when it comes out of White Stag, it continues to have some governance and some obligation, at least for the first year, so that if they let it break, it won't fly.
So does that mean you all stay with it for the part of the transition? I just understand, translate governance into something I can...
So what we're thinking is that our governing body will continue to govern it, but there'll be KPIs, and then also a corporate group that does strategic initiatives would start to take this into there and oversee it. However, as we've been working on our projects, we have created a conundrum for ourselves that makes it so that there is not this bright line moment. So that alone was going to be hard enough to deal with. Instead, we focused on, we want to make sure we get things to market really fast. Some of us had been in startups. We don't know what we don't know until we get it out there into the marketplace. We can bake it for a long time, but until it's there, we won't know. So we adopted what we call a Google beta model, or it's a sort of a prototyping model, but the idea is that we try to get something into market as an actual launch that's sort of de-risked and de-featured, and kind of build on from there. So put it in there, out there, learn, and then go. So what have we done though? We've created these little mini launches that now have questions about transition. And so there's not this bright line transition. There are instead these transitional moments for steps along the way. And some of those steps are like pilots, they have beginnings and ends, so that doesn't need to transition. So figuring that out is something we are in the middle of, and in fact, over the last day, I've been doing a lot of emailing with my team as we're preparing to talk with the second segment about what it's going to be like when we do something.
My suggestion is save those emails. You're going to enjoy reading them about a year from now.
Now, what triggered me, what we really learned is that if you do disruptive innovation, there are two adoption curves. A lot of people know, I think, the chasm of Moore. But what we have found out, and it's also by Moore itself, in fact, the chasm of Moore is caused by two adoption curves. Mm-hmm. You always have one which helps you to build the market, and there's the one who will grow the market. The corporate companies like to go to that one directly and skipping the first one.
Well, you can do that in an incremental innovation in existing markets, but new growth areas don't, which is why you end up with the chasm.
Well, what you need is that first one needs to be a stepping stone. So if you need, for example, in healthcare, if you only have key opinion leaders, they are not interested to really get it into the flow of the workflow of a hospital.
Right.
So you need to have customers who can do the transition. So the transition is not only within your own company, it's especially outside.
So this
we
speaks
work much
to the
more
partnerships again, a new kind of partnership.
But also kind of bowling pin. What we ask our business...
well, you lost me on the bowling pin.
Bowling pin is that what we do on a kind of bowling alley. What we ask our ventures is to say, before you go launching, indicate what is the first pin, the first group you want to hit, but they have to explain to us what is the kind of, how are you going to leverage to the market. So it's much more about the leverage. So I'm of course interested in that first market they want to target.
So this is a market attack plan where it's clear where the first...
But the leverage is the important. Okay. So always I ask, if you have this first customer, how it will lead you to the next one. And that helps. And often that when the company has done it well, the venture, we say they are much more successful than the one they are stuck and they have their first successes and they loop forever.
Right. Let me follow up, and we're going to get to questions and answers in a second. Certainly questions. We'll work on the answers too. But question I have for you all is how do you mitigate the organizational antibodies that do challenge you at the various stages we've talked about? Because done successfully, it's like magic. It just, things happen. But done unsuccessfully, there's some terrible train wrecks that I alluded to before, where great ideas and businesses that should have survived didn't. They got killed or otherwise squashed or pushed into some marginal improvement when they could have been the next new thing. So it's not a trivial task, but it's not always a lost battle. Many are won. What are sort of the three things, not long explanation, just give me 1, 2, 3 about what you would say. And if you repeat each other, that's fine. But what are the three things you do to mitigate
First, have an environment where you have freedom to operate for this pilot to learn to the market. The other has a separate governance. What we have business development boards, which people are in already from the transfer organization.
So they're involved in it early on. Okay.
But they are involved, but and also that's important, and have people with domain knowledge. Never start a venture with a person, not with people who are not knowing the ecosystem, because they are crucial for the transfer.
Good. What about you?
So for our three, there's two that we put in place at the beginning when we created White Stag, and then there's one that's been emergent subsequent. So the first one is really kind of two, and it's about our overall structure. So number one, we come with our own budget, so we're not a shared service and we're not begging for money, and so people don't have to choose between today and tomorrow. And we have a governance structure that consists of the senior leadership of the company and of the divisions, and they govern what we do and our go, no-goes, as opposed to us contracting with a specific business. So that right there does a world of wonder. The second one is when we're kicking off any project, or when we're proposing a project to our Innovation Investment Council that is with a business unit, it always will have signatures, as we call it, from that division, the head of strategy, the head of the division.
Signatures meaning?
They have to be on board. They have to want this.
Okay.
They have to say, we will partner with White Stag to do this.
Yep.
And we've also added subsequently the identification of the point person for us, who plays an important role, not necessarily in decision making, but in being a guide. What's been emergent is we find that when we're working with the businesses, we don't have this overt conflict. I don't even think we have a subversive conflict. And I think whatever we have is not intentional. It's almost more just awkward because we're making decisions in part for them and working through them. And we had tried to have our own separate process. But what we have found is that when
your own separate process for
executing.
Got it.
But we would work with them. What we found, though, was that when we're working on something significant, because we're not using the normal processes of the business unit, it's almost like our partners in the business unit, they don't press enter when we talk. So like when you said keep the email, you said to laugh, and mine is no, I need to keep it so that later on I can show them, no, we did talk about this, and here's what you said. So and no one wants to be in that kind of a relationship with their business partner. And so what we realized is as we get later on and closer to going to market on something, we do need to start to play into some of their normal processes and rhythm and way that they structure their groups. Otherwise, we won't be effective and we won't be able to get things done. We have to strike a balance, because if we do too much of it, you'll kill our processes.
Right.
So our two stages, what we have recognized, you have what we call the baby stage, which is really making the plan. It's almost imaginary.
Yep.
Then you go out there in the market, but there are also two stages. One is you are working with your first adoption curve on getting proof that you are not crazy, but there's really something behind.
Demonstrate validity, right.
But there's also a second phase, and that is getting the organization in place to make it happen. And we really distinct, so it's almost two test rounds, the alpha and the beta, and we really discuss that. So one is make it happen that you have testimonials and the market is telling you, yes, we see this new category. And then you have a test phase, which is get the organization, including partners, everything in place so that you can really scale. Okay. And then often people say, okay, I have proof, now run for it. And then also you go flat.
One question, simple answer. Technology is not working well with me here for a second. So if you had it to do all over again, and someone walked up to you and said, do you want to head up this incubator thing? And it's not quite sure what it is, and we're not sure how it'll work, but we do know we need it. The old model's not working. Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
Of course.
On that note, I'm going to turn to the audience and ask if there are any questions. I've got a few, but if you don't, we'll keep going. Any questions you want to come our way? There is a person in the middle there that stepped right up to the challenge.
What are you doing with the people that you're getting into this group? Because one of the problems we've had, or I had with a 10-year incubator corporate venture, is the people that are really good at doing this don't want to go back to the existing business. The existing business don't necessarily want them back either because they're a little bit
feral,
whatever you want to call it. And so
that's what they call it. That's not my term.
But then you are basically making these people very visible on the outside too. That's the other thing. They're very visible because they're looking at the market, and they're very attractive to third parties. So how do you deal with that?
I think there's two ways. There's also at certain moments when it's not going right. It's not always a success. And I think how you treat the people who really try to make a success out of a venture, and not by mismanagement, but just it wasn't there, is very important that the organizations see how you treat them. Because if you would then fire them or whatsoever, nobody will work in this environment. Yes, people don't want to go back, but you get a kind of serial entrepreneurs. And it really helps. So you see that these people start over again. And there also is there are people who like the first stage, the baby stage, and you have people who like the second stage. So we really do a kind of planning with the people based upon their expertise. And some we really let them look more in that early stage. And we have people who are very well in this transition stage. And how you treat your people in incubation is which kind of people quality you get.
Answer the question, and then I want to come back to this just real quickly. How would you answer his question?
We're still figuring it out, and it's certainly not easy. Although what we're finding is that our team members are viewed quite attractively by the rest of the business, and that's a little unfortunate for me. And at the same time, we're at this point becoming more attractive for people within the company to come in and do sort of rotations. We have a kind of the front end and back end thing going on. And so for the back end, we really like to bring in people from the business. And so we're at the point of being able to attract them. And so that's all goodness. And
let me add to that. All of that's true. Remember I said that incubation, to a great extent, was developed because of pressures on existing systems that weren't producing the results. And in fact, an interesting thing happens if you actually rotate the staff from the incubator in some way, either because they're hired back in, or you rotate them with the new business that you've just put in there, or you just cycle them through. You begin to instill in the rest of the organization new DNA about innovation. And it begins to change that company's process that wasn't responsive before. It suddenly starts to look and feel more like the incubator. And the business units begin to pick up the same tools, techniques, governance structures, and the mimicking is very high. So it's not just a case that no one wants them. Actually, getting them back in there is important because it helps create a more compatible environment in the long run. Yes?
Absolutely. And for us, it's also one of the reasons why we want to corporate venturing. One of our objectives, indeed, is to get different flavor of people. Because we also have attract more people from the outside because domain knowledge is essential.
Right.
So we are not a kind of rotating top potentials who want there for 3 years and go to another function. We really look for people who have a long-term commitment and also know the domain, because if you have no domain knowledge, I will stop a certain venture.
Good. Any more questions? I wanted to actually talk about the people once more. How do you find the right kind of people to be these entrepreneurs? Again, I posited that you and some of those folks are a special breed. Not just entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs that know how to work in this corporate environment to be able to create value that in general people aren't able to do. They have to have the right processes and governance. We talked about it, but it takes some special people. How do you ever find these folks, or do they find you?
Both. I think it's both. It's based upon when people know that you have a certain protected environment at the incubation, then you see also that certain people would work for it. People sometimes said, if we knew, we wouldn't work for Philips if you didn't have those incubators, because we are really very interested in the way you do so. It sounds strange, I look for people who have really bruises.
Bruises?
Yeah, because you won't have to have the people who everything went well, of course it's great, but you venturing, especially in corporate environments, you will you get hit. You have certain things, so you want to see how people really can deal. So it's not only that I look at people who have serial entrepreneurship, but also people who have went through tremendous change processes.
So it's not that they've just been bruised, it's that they're willing to come back and continue to be bruised.
They can deal with it, and it's so if you're without any bruises, the first time
quite an image,
it's quite.
But again, these people have to be hard-headed enough to say this is important, and while the bruises are there, they're just bruises. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, but also how can you deal with resistance? Because that is, especially in corporate environment, you have a breadth of capabilities you would never have if you just started your own company. And this type of people are different than the people who will start their own company. So if you think that the corporate venturing is per definition different than the kind of garage type of venturing, you have to also be clear for yourself.
Jacqueline.
So there's the external hires and the internal hires. And the external hires, we find them, they find us. LinkedIn is an amazing thing. People find us and send us emails, postings.
I was wondering what that was for.
All of that. The bigger challenge for us is geography. So once someone meets us, I think they get excited about what we're doing, and then we usually have, there's usually geography questions because
Does that mean that they have to come and move?
They have to come to Hartford, which is actually a lovely place to live.
I wanted to decode that statement a little bit.
It is a wonderful place to live, having moved from San Francisco.
But people do it because they like it so much.
Right.
I mean, no kidding aside, incubators are amazingly attractive, particularly to folks that like to get bruised and that have proven themselves capable of carrying on even though there's resistance.
Right. And there is a self-selection element to it, right? And I think people are excited about what we're doing because what we're doing is an incubator that is somewhat exemplar for the current times, and people get excited about that, and they think about the skills they're developing for this sort of innovation space of the future. Internally, it's very much kind of twofold. One is self-selection. People know what we do, or they're working with us, and they find out about us, and they come to us. And then there's also, we're working with someone, and if they've got what it takes, we go after them. And but whether it's internal or external, and we were looking for different skills from them, but there's a temperament element that's the same, and so it's very similar to that bruising part. And so, I have a series of questions that I ask every candidate, and some of it really gets...
Give me an example. I'm not putting you on the spot per se, but I mean, just sort of like, give me just what are the questions aimed at uncovering?
The questions are aimed at uncovering intellectual curiosity, ability to just persevere against all odds and kind of have the audacity to believe that you can create something out of nothing, but yet, interestingly, it is a different person oftentimes than someone who's done their own company, although we have a number of those people, including myself. But there's that perseverance, audacity, intellectual curiosity. I try to make sure people have some understanding of what a business model is, which is outside of this community, not necessarily common knowledge.
Right.
Those are some of the main things, but there is this temperament element to it that is very, very important, and we try to make sure that our roles, particularly our back-end roles, aren't burnout roles, because they are really, really hard. And so we need to have really strong temperaments.
Excellent.
And I think also it's the composition of the team. So it's not that you look at
not just
isolation.
Individuals, right?
Now we really, and it's with venturing, it's quite dynamic. You need in the different stages different people, and we are open to people. Say we think we can bring it to a certain one. The chance that a person really can bring it from the very start to the end.
People that manage babies are different than those that manage
so you have to
teenagers.
be honest, and then you have to have systems where you really can rotate certain things in it. And for me, it's also the capability of adaptive. So if you have a certain things and something was a negative feedback, can make something positive. Say, hey, okay, then we can go into this direction.
Excellent.
That
is for me also a very important criteria.
And so we call it the mosaic. And so our executive recruiter can get pretty frustrated with me, because if we have a number of positions that are open at a particular time, she'll be like, well, what do you want for each of these? I'm like, well, it depends on what the next one I hire is. That's going to determine then what the next one should be, and that'll determine the next one. And it's because very few people have everything that we would like in one person. So it's about building the team in the mosaic.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you both.
Thank you.
It's been an excellent discussion, and thank you all for the good questions and the participation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent.